Hi. Today I'm going to talk to you about a strategy that um, I haven't yet completely tried. And so over the next month or so, I'm going to be working with this strategy and maybe updating the blog um, as I go, so I can report on how things are progressing. Um, because in some ways, the strategy is kind of the opposite of some of the advice that I've already given on the blog and that I've been following myself. And so I want to test this one out. And this strategy is writing to a structure. And I have been reading about it in this really amazing book called The Writer's Portable Mentor by Priscilla Long. There's a lot of really great advice in here for writers of all kinds. It's definitely not geared towards academic writers, but I think that there are a lot of goodies in there that can be helpful to us. The strategy of writing to a structure is especially useful if you are trying something new, trying a new kind of piece, something that you haven't done before. And so I think it's especially useful for graduate students. You might be writing a comprehensive exam, you might be writing a thesis proposal or a thesis for the first time. And it's helpful to have a model that you're working with. I think it's important to point out that you're already writing to a structure when you're doing academic writing. It's incredibly rare that we start from scratch and we don't use like a introduction, lit review, theoretical framework, methods, results, discussion kind of structure. Of course, that's a very social sciences structure that I just named, and other disciplines probably have other very common structures. But we tend to use these kind of tried and true structures, and well, sometimes they get a bad rap, like you're not being creative if you're writing to a structure like this. I think it's like writing a sonnet. You know, the sonnet is a structure that offers some constraints that really allows you to be creative within those constraints. So I don't have a problem at all with writing to a structure. And the way that Priscilla Long talks about it is, you know, you begin with a structure and you work within it. You build a piece to a certain structure, and then you evaluate and you see how well the structure fits, and then you let the piece of structure develop in a way that suits it. And so this means that the structure that you're going to be working with is a starting point. And then at some point you let the piece take the structure that it needs. But it's really useful to start with a kind of a scaffold to build with. So writing to a structure is sort of like an outline, but I think that it goes one deeper. And so an outline will often, as I said, you might write introduction, and then write down a few of the key points that you want to make, and then you write lit review and a few of the key points that you want to make. But it goes one deeper than that. So when you're writing to a structure, Priscilla Long suggests you start by counting. Look at this. So find an exemplar piece. Sorry, this is where you start. You find an exemplar, something that does what you want to do and does it relatively well, something that reads well, something that allows you to follow it, something that's compelling, the language works, and you're going to use that as a model. So you start with your exemplar and then you start counting. So what are the sections? Do they have titles? If it's academic writing, most likely they do have titles. And so you're going to count the sections, write down their titles. Within each section, you want to understand, what is this section contributing to the whole? That can be fairly challenging to figure out on a section by section basis. I find it most useful to go paragraph by paragraph. And so it's somewhat similar to a reverse outline, where you take a piece of writing and figure out what it's saying and turn it into an outline. But again, going a little bit deeper for the structure. So instead of just summarizing the content of a paragraph, I want you to look at each paragraph, figure out what that is contributing to the whole. So for example, you might be looking at an introductory chapter for a dissertation. And within that introductory chapter, there are several sections. Within the first section, what is that first paragraph doing? Most often, the first paragraph of a piece of academic writing is laying out a landscape and a big problem. And it's obviously related to where the paper is going to go, but it's sort of setting it out in grander terms than maybe you're going to use throughout, because often we have really big ideas and big questions in our academic writing, and then we focus on a piece of it to try to say something about that bigger process. And so you'll ask yourself, within each section, what is each paragraph doing? Okay, so the first paragraph is possibly, as I said, laying out a big issue and explaining its importance. Often the second paragraph is a really abbreviated summary of the literature, really broad strokes. A third paragraph might be giving the author's desired contribution to this big problem, and so on. I think paragraph level works really well. When you're getting into the nitty-gritty of the writing, you might actually start to deconstruct paragraphs into sentences in that way. I think I don't know if I could say in all writing, in a lot of writing, the paragraphs are meant to have one single idea that gets developed and supported through the paragraph. And in academic writing, I think that that's really important. And again, this goes back to the bigger idea of structure, that structure is meant to it helps your reader understand where you're going if you structure it well. And so a paragraph that contains one big idea that connects to the previous and connects to the next, that helps your reader follow what you're doing. So we're following a structure not just because it's there, but because readers use the kind of their metacognitive or meta sort of reading skills. They use the structure to help them understand where you're going. So you're actually doing your reader a favor by writing to a structure. As I said, you can go, if you have trouble writing paragraphs that hang together, you might analyze a few paragraphs to see what is the first sentence doing, what is the second, the third, the fourth sentence. You want to pick paragraphs that read well to you so that you can analyze them and try to imitate them. Okay, so you enumerate how many sections are there, what are their titles, how many paragraphs within each section, what is each paragraph contributing to the whole, and this is what you're trying to do with your piece. You're not trying to imitate the content of the paragraphs, but you're imitating how they fit together into a structure. Yeah, and using this as a template for your own work. Now, once you have drafted, so you might write your own introductory chapter, and you follow the structure, you split it into similar sections with your own headings. You figure out what each of the paragraphs is doing. You try to create paragraphs that do that as well. And then you want to evaluate, maybe your introductory chapter requires an extra section or an extra few paragraphs, or it doesn't need some of the same machinery that the piece, your exemplar piece uses. That's easier to figure out once you've already started to put your stuff in place. One other plug that I have for using a structure is that I know the tendency in myself, and I see it in drafts that I read of other people, that often we might be writing about a particular topic. Maybe we're analyzing some data, maybe it's a theoretical piece. We want to include everything. And so we're trying to just fit everything together. That betrays a particular stance on writing, that you're just kind of, you're just conveying as much information as you can. I prefer to think about trying to create a piece that hangs together and has an impact on the reader. So writing to a structure can help you to let go of some of the material that you wish would fit in, but it just might not fit in and might need to go into a separate piece. So normally I like to do these blogs about strategies that I've already tried myself, so I can give examples. I have not practiced writing to a structure in this particular way. And so I'm going to be trying that out over the next few weeks as I'm drafting a new piece. And I hope to update as we go, to let you know how it's going for me. So I hope that this is useful for you. It's kind of the opposite of the generative writing process, which is just write and write and write as much as you can and then try to figure out a sort of internal structure to what you've written. This is, I think that the two can go somewhat hand in hand, but writing to a structure is already more selective about what gets included than like a free writing process is. So if you try it out, I'd love to hear how it goes. Best of luck and enjoy.